Hey, is anyone down there? Oh, there it is. Okay. Well, get started. Good afternoon. This is the August 21st, 2023 Riverfront Advisory Committee meeting. Like to open. You sent the notes, the meeting minutes from last time?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
From June something.
Has anyone had a chance to review them? I'll admit that I have not.
I've looked at it and it looks reasonable to me.
I made one minor fix at the bottom. I didn't have the correct, I had this meeting listed twice, one with the correct date and one with the wrong date. I fixed it.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, no, thanks again, Joe, for keeping up with that. That's fine.
That is a big,
Helpful.
I'm doing it from the, I'm now got roped into doing it for the Coastal Conservation Board that I'm on, so.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort, so
Yeah.
thanks for making it up. So do want to mention that Mike Hoffman has submitted his resignation as a member to the committee. Definitely want to thank Mike for all of his help and effort getting us to this point. He's been a really good resource. So, you know, thank him for his time on the committee. If anyone's out there and interested in joining, there is at least one opening on the committee. So just make that announcement. If you want to submit something, please submit to Town Hall. So I think the first thing I wanted to touch on briefly was that concept that Bar had mentioned about starting the master plan committee. I think it's great that they've extended an invitation to this committee to put somebody on it, especially since it sounds like there's going to be a parks chapter. Does anyone want to volunteer for that?
What is how much meeting is going to be going on with that? Do you have any?
I don't think they know yet. I mean, Bar had just kind of mentioned that there's not like a defined meeting schedule or anything established so far. It's probably going to be something that lasts for like 2 to 3 years, you know, whatever the horizon is for them starting and generating the master plan. So I don't think it's like an into perpetuity thing. It definitely seems like it has a sunset. But in terms of how much involvement they're looking for, I'm not sure I know. I'm not sure they know. We could also table somebody. I guess I'm putting it out there more if anyone was excited about the idea.
I have some input that I would like to give them, but I can't. I'm already on 3 committees here and 3 other committees for community power, so it's like I have something every week.
Yeah, and like I very much like want to do it. I am excited about it. I'm just thinking about the logistics of it, and I'm not sure if that's a winning strategy.
I guess what I would say is, you know, I think we could view this as only 3 of us. Nobody's jumped, or 4 of us, excuse me, I should be able to count, but nobody's jumping all over this. I wouldn't, you know, I've because I was on the council, I've been on a lot of these committees, you know, was the council represented the planning board, the conservation, been on the, so I wouldn't mind getting started with it and seeing what the ask is like, how much time and how much, you know, what's going on, and not, but it may be that you know, at some point I'm saying, hey, can somebody else take this?
Yeah, I'm also fine if we want to, you know, table it and like wait for more information. If they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna meet once every 3 months, or it's like we're gonna meet 3 times a week. Like we can wait for more.
Oh, that would definitely matter. Yeah.
I think it was more just if anyone was really excited about the opportunity, give the opportunity to kind of throw your name out there.
No, I wouldn't be hurt at all.
Yeah. That's.
Let me be clear about
Yeah.
that.
I would be an alternate, or, you know,
Yeah,
that
so
backup person.
I mean, I don't think there's any like a major imminent So I'd say like, why don't we wait until we hear more
Okay.
about it and just say like, well, we'll staff it with some input, and it just depends what the actual ask is on who is taking
Yeah.
that.
Makes sense. Good.
I did get a note from Lindsay, the town engineer, as well, just updating the committee on a couple things. She's away and not able to join today, but she did say that the town's planning grant that they put into the Clean Water SRF to do additional kind of investigation work along Moonlight Brook is on the project priority list and should be funded when that list gets finalized, which I think is next month. So
What was the official, what's the title of it?
the Clean Water SRF, CWSRF, which is administered through DES. On the stormwater side, you can submit like planning level projects. So something like Moonlight Brook would meet that threshold of there's something going on, we're not quite sure what. It may not be a construction project. We need to do some investigation to figure it out. So I believe the town put in something to that effect to continue looking at the watershed as a whole, knowing there's some level of issue there. And like I said, that should get funded, which would allow the town access to those funds next year.
So we don't know for sure that we've been approved, but it's high on the list.
Once you're on the list, you usually don't get bumped off.
Okay.
It's more if people that rank higher don't accept the funding, the people that rank lower can move up into those spots. If you're already in a spot that's going to get funded, you usually don't come out for any reason. I guess on a similar vein, we had that whole concept about the signage. There's been some discussion at the town level about potential signage at Moonlight Brook. It's an ongoing issue, and we're kind of leaving it to the town to determine what they're going to do next.
So I'll just add that at the last council meeting, and prior to the last council meeting, Dale had approached me, and I talked to Steve, and Steve was kind of, well, it's really a DES thing, but at the last council meeting, somebody from the Lamprey Riverfront Association there came and spoke, and I think that kind of like got the ball rolling here, and so Steve said, okay, we will look into it, and now I understand like Bart and them are looking at it. So.
Yeah, because then I went before the Conservation Commission, because I bumped into Amy Gigande at a neighborhood meeting that I was referencing, and was talking to some people there, and Amy, you know, the question comes up, you know, what's safe, what's not safe, because people ask her about getting out of their kayaks and into the water, you know, putting their feet in the water. And I'm not saying we have it up here, but it's all over the news now about if you have any cuts or open wounds on your legs where there's, and the water is warm, and, you know, that there can be, you need to be careful about that. So I think it's something to understand, and there has been all the testing associated with the broken pipe, and that's fixed, but it was at its worst in front of Moonlight Brook, and that might be because of contamination coming down the brook, but it also could be because that's where the ducks hang out, because that's where people feed the ducks, even though they're not supposed to feed the ducks there. So,
They can tell by DNA, you know, what the...
right, they can tell that, but they didn't do the studies yet. When the town, some of the data from looking at the landing comes from what the town did at the time of they did monitoring at the time of the break, but they didn't do DNA on that. So you saw very high bacterial contamination at the landing, but you wouldn't know whether it came from ducks or from the brook.
I was under the impression that they were doing the studies and saying, oh yeah, it is in fact fecal matter.
So that's a different effort that
That's two different.
LRAC is funding through Dr. Steve Jones with UNH. So I did actually reach out to him a couple weeks ago just to ask, because I had gone out with him and Lindsay in like May and showed him kind of some of the backwoods upstream parts of Moonlight Brook. So I just asked him how that data was coming along. Basically his response was it's not final, they're still trying to do more and they're still trying to collect more, but that they were finding widespread bacterial issues through like every part of Moonlight Brook, not just the outfall, but even like upstream. So it's definitely, something is happening. There's some ongoing issue, but what it is, it doesn't seem to be quantified yet.
Yeah, I think that's what got LRAC involved, is the concern being that, okay, it's clearly an issue, and there's not as much information as we like to have. I mean, in other words, we don't know if what's going on the riverside is due to the local, the duck poop and all of that stuff, which could do it. But we do know on the other side, the brook side, we know that when the testing is consistently showing problematic and human DNA. So it's something, and LRAC's communication back at the beginning of the summer, let's say, was not as collaborative as some would like to have seen. So I think that it's all good to know that, but I think it shouldn't change the fact that I think people in the public would rightfully expect that what is known about that, there would be some information on that they can see if they go there and their kids are playing, like, watch out for this. And don't go down and play in that little brook lagoon there. Yeah. You could have some education about our efforts to find a solution. Mostly the town, but we've been part of that. Whoever, there's been efforts. Long term, the town is looking for a solution. In the meantime, it's worth knowing, and I think there's not enough. I don't know what the risk are, because they had. I was just looking at it because I've been following this information, and I'm not saying the risk is here, but in warmer estuaries, warmer brackish water, there's a problem making news in several places about Vibrio right now. They had 3 deaths in Connecticut, Long Island Sound. They're saying the problem is moving now north, and it's bad in salt water that's warm. And Lamprey River is,
especially at low tide.
Right, it's warm. So I think people just need some information to be posted there, and it's reinforced that they shouldn't feed ducks there, because all of this makes it less safe for the kind of uses that we work long and hard to clean up rivers in this country so that you can have swimming in these places and stuff like that.
That's a good point. Do not feed the ducks at Shannon Park. It's a huge problem right now.
Right, they're just, if the water isn't bad enough, just trying to walk down, and for people that are trying to put watercraft in there, they got to dodge all the crap.
They're absurd, and it's clearly they're changing their normal behaviors because of human interaction. I mean, like, they actually jumped. I was down there with my daughter the other day, and it actually jumped up and grabbed the thing out of her hand that she was eating.
Oh.
Like, I've never seen that. Like, that's not how ducks behave.
Whoa.
But they're like so conditioned to being offered things from humans that now they're like just taking them.
Oh, geez.
Right, and they can get and wildlife will get very aggressive.
Mhm.
I didn't know ducks would, I know seagulls would do that, I didn't know ducks would.
Absolutely wild.
When we first moved here, my daughter was, just graduated from college, and she was so taken with the beauty. There used to be swans around more. I think wildlife people have been trying to do things that discourage the swan population, because they're tough on eelgrass because they have that long neck. Geese are bad enough, but swans are kind of an invasive species. So there used to be more swans around your team. There was one that was quite tame that would go up and down the river. So she was on my land, and I didn't know better then, but she was going down and feeding the swan, and the swan came after her to get the food. And they are a large bird, it jumped the
big.
heck out of her.
Yeah.
So if we had any kind of signage that, you know, rather than, besides just saying, watch out, it's, here are all things you should know.
Yeah, and I think too, if more people are aware of it, if anybody has any sense of, hey, that's coming from, and that's where Moonlight Brook goes, do I know something about what's happening up there? Because we do have people who walk in the woods up there, and people who are there at the school who might go, oh yeah, I've seen whatever, or, oh, yeah. And we might turn up some information that otherwise wouldn't be available.
Yeah, one thing for sure, I think they're gonna have to do quite a bit of investigation up there to getting enough attention.
Yeah, and
That's what,
it does seem like on top of potentially whatever the town put in for clean water SRF, there might even be additional info, and I'll kind of leave it at that, just because I don't want to misstate anything that Lindsay had said to me. So if she's at the next meeting, I'll let her speak to that. But the town might even be looking for more potential projects related to the Moonlight Brook watershed. So I do think the town's putting solid effort and resource into it, which seems to be needed at this point with just everything that keeps coming up.
yeah, because I know, I communicated back and forth with Ellen from Conservation Commission, and
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit, until nothing's official, so they're not communicating very much, let's put it that way, and I think, so it's good to know that work is underway. Like I say, long-term, all the right things are being done to really investigate how to fix the Moonlight Brook.
Good to
We're
know.
doing all the right things on that, but in the meantime, that could literally take a couple of years, I
It could
think,
be a
easily.
while.
Wow.
So in the meantime, you have to, people need to know.
And be conscious and aware and cautious.
Yeah, and I think it's just, yeah, I'm glad to hear the town's on it, but it's that communication angle of, like, once people start hearing that there's an issue, the communication of what's being done for the issue becomes important. Same with the break under the river. Everyone heard about the break, but did everyone hear when it got resolved? Like, maybe not as much,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I think too, these really are opportunities to understand, I mean, people have to know there's, all kinds of fecal contamination can be bad. Human seems to be the one of greatest concern because it's human diseases and stuff. But there's dog fecal material that also isn't great for our waterways and stuff like that. So it's important not to leave dog poop where it washes into the river, or into the brook and stuff like that. All that stuff is really important. But the duck stuff is the fact that the count was so much higher right at the landing speaks. To me, it's more likely the ducks, the waterfowl. It could be the brook. I don't know, but I question whether it's.
Yeah.
So we'll know more as time goes on and see what's going on, but I don't think I think it's, in a way, we're pretty close to the end of the season anyway, so the signage should be well thought out. I mean, we've talked a lot about the role that signage can play there in terms of climate adaptation, sea level rise and stuff like that. If we have a living shoreline, there's educational opportunities. I think this is another good, you were touching on the issues and it's come up about stormwater.
Yeah.
And this is definitely something that's very much integrated with a conversation about stormwater management in our little town. And, what comes down the street and across the landing, and what are we pulling in for contamination. Feeding the animals is not the natural state for those animals. They're much more dispersed normal. So, anyway.
Yeah, and I do think, the Conservation Commission may support doing some stuff with the signage. So we'll wait to hear the town's input on some spots. But something about like the ducks or stormwater management, things like that. We have been talking about potential signage down there and just kind of redoing and updating some of that. So, yeah, I definitely think there'd be support there.
So. And it also builds support too for or, I mean, the more citizens understand what's at stake and how
Mm-hmm.
these things all tie together,
Yeah.
then you understand, because, you know, significant resources go in just in terms of hiring people and having, you know, the infrastructure, personnel infrastructure, people in the town, you know, it'd be tough to do this without Lindsay, I'll say that. So,
Yeah.
she went, I don't know if, you know, but I found out that she went to the Lamprey River Advisory Committee meeting in July.
Okay, I hadn't heard. It's
Yeah,
good to know.
So, I was glad to hear that, and I think that was good, you know, sort of like, there's not a lot she could say,
Yeah.
but being there and saying, we hear you was a good thing.
Yeah, we hear you, something's going on.
And being the husband of the council chair, what didn't hurt.
On I guess that vein, is there anything potentially being discussed at the council level that like is relevant to us? Anything that comes up with this stuff? I know there's a lot you guys cover, but just out of curiosity.
No, not really. Other than me bringing up Moonlight Brook almost every other session or whatever. No, there really hasn't been much talk about downtown here.
Is there any definition on timeline for the master plan? I don't know exactly how that was funded or initiated, so I don't.
No, there hasn't really been any discussion about the master plan. There has been started some discussion that they're going to do a charter review. Okay, start a new charter commission and go through that.
What's I guess the goal of that?
Well, it should be, Steve, according to Steve, it should be reviewed at least every 10 years or whatever, to see what needs to change.
I can remember the last one. Back when
So,
Yeah.
there may be, I don't know, there may be some changes to the way they think government should be run, like
sometimes
when
it
it
comes
comes to
to
budgets and stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I was on the review committee for the school board on all the regulations, and it was amazing to me how much of it was strictly language, like the language around the topic has
If at the state
evolved.
level, they change the law, and it no longer is reflected in our language, then you go
Yeah.
through the process of
Right.
cleaning all that up.
Sounds
Yeah.
like you need a bunch of lawyers.
On the master plan, I'm on the Energy Environment Committee, and there's reference in the master plan to a energy chapter, but there isn't any energy chapter, so we're working on an energy chapter for the master plan. While we were working on that, I don't know, I looked at the vision statement or whatever, and I found it very lacking, so we've rewritten the vision section as well, and, you know, we're gonna pass that on to Bar and say, hey, you know, here's something for you to consider about the vision section.
Is this a vision statement for the whole master plan? Or?
Yeah, a vision for the whole master plan. It talks about, you know, what should a master plan encompass, you know, energy, community, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. We actually ripped it off. I ripped it off from Rye or 11 on.
Borrowed.
They modified it.
Creatively borrowed.
Yeah.
Look for
I-
good examples. How's that for
But
you?
and I thought it was a very good, you know, vision statement. So
Oh, that's good. That's good to do.
Yeah, and I think that might be interesting is, knowing that process is starting, knowing that the town is potentially going to put forward a chapter just on town space or parks or, you know, how we utilize our open spaces. That's where I'm wondering if that's something that we can do, is kind of regardless of whoever physically shows up and provides the input for that, if we as a committee want to start talking about the things that we want to advance, like what we want that to say. You know, again, we don't have the only say, but then there's at least goals at this level or input at this level that whoever ends up going or advocating for knows kind of where we stand.
the Dover, the General Sullivan Bridge is for sale. I was thinking, hey, we buy that for $1 and there's our bridge to Hearn Point.
That would be hilarious.
I'm sure they'd be happy to decide it, sell it to you for $1. especially-
Yeah, $1 million bucks a move.
If you'll disassemble it, yeah, and transport it.
It's like, what is that gonna cost, like $26 million to take the bridge down?
Oh,
I
jeez.
don't even know. Yeah, you can buy it for $1, transport it for $20 million.
I would personally like us to see just get some stuff done. You know, I
Yeah.
think 2 years, I think we're starting to finally make some progress in Moonlight Brook, which really has to be addressed before you can address the, you know, do much with the Riverwalk and expand it down to the, into that, you know, area behind the Public Works there.
Yeah, especially with my work experience being on the private side, it's definitely taken a little bit longer to start moving on some of these things than I'm used
I
to.
do see movement finally. You know,
But
after
I agree. Like, it seems like the path is chartered, and there's a clear direction that things are going, and you know, the foundation is being laid so that these objectives and these things that we've been discussed are going to happen. So I am excited to kind of see that going through.
Yeah, and there've been some advantage, I mean, nobody can argue that it hasn't been slow going. At the same time, when we started this committee, we had neither a director of planning nor a town engineer.
Yep.
So we at least started the discussions and were, you know, engaging those kind of conversations, took advantage of Mike when he was around. He had a lot of insights and history. And I thought it was great that Mike said he's still available if we want to check in with him. If you want to understand what's happened in the past, he's a real wealth of information.
Yeah, he really is. It's
Right,
shocking how
yeah.
much he knows.
So he's still a resource to us, and
Yeah.
that was really, really great and generous of him. But a lot of things were accomplished that were kind of hit and miss because, you know, we had to wait for some help to come alongside, and we have that now. And I think, you know, those were big decisions to really, you know, advocate for and try to address some of the foundational problems down in that Shanda Park area. And the recognition too, I think Mike added a lot when we understood to have, as we get ready for that public meeting, to have a better understanding. We've seen that the town owns a lot of waterfront. And it's a lot more than just little Shanda Park. Shanda Park is so important, but there's a lot more. And some of the functions that we were trying to put all into that one living shoreline plan maybe can be, okay, maybe the living shoreline can be down the river a little bit to be more extensive, you know, break it up a little bit and make sure, you know, because we can't afford to lose any of the functionality that we have in Shanda Park now. It'd be great if we could expand it.
I'd like to expand. One of the things I was thinking about, we got the charrette coming up at some point in time, but is there something that we could do with, you know, involving the businesses in downtown? If you can somehow get them involved a little bit, I think that kind of like, you know, pushes the town council and everybody to get stuff done. I don't know. Cooperation with them, or, you know, I'm not sure if I'm wording it correctly, but.
Yeah, I know it. I think I know what you're saying.
If we can get them involved a little bit more on somehow improving the waterfront and whatever, it benefits them, benefits us to get things done.
Yeah. Well, I think along that line, Joe, anything, you know, it may be good if we can, you know, I think we're gonna be talking about the things, the scope that goes before the charrette. You know, we'll wanna certainly do that conversation when Bart's here and not before, I think. But we were gonna talk about what we think that discussion should look like a little bit, or some of the things that we need to know before the charrette occurs, so that we have some information.
So, is that something we need to start doing, start working on what the charrette is gonna cover?
I think that we were talking about that at the beginning of the summer, is trying to understand a lot more. Because when we started talking, when we were talking about a charrette in September, I was like, well, what is the scope of this? You know, I think you have to give people some guidelines of what, you don't want to put them in a box, but at the same time, you want some guidelines of what we're specifically looking at input on.
I think that's wise.
I think otherwise you won't get much out of it if you don't do it.
It has to have some focus and direction, yep.
Right, and that's a lot of work just doing that. And the other thing we talked about in June, I think, was the idea that we might try to as individuals, and there's no way I was gonna do it last summer, it was crazy, but you know, about looking at Dover's plan, looking at what Exeter's done. Bart said Exeter might be some of the best examples, but just even if we have some spare time as individuals to kind of go and look around there, you know, I may schedule a few minutes with Bart sometimes and just get some more input from him on that, you know. But just to kind of understand what other towns are doing with their municipal parks and,
Yeah.
you know, what's applicable, what's not, that kind of thing.
I think that remains a good idea, and I know I had kind of volunteered to look into Dover stuff a little bit and can still do that at some point.
Yeah, it's not too late.
Yeah, it's not too late. I do like the idea of, you know, maybe at a future meeting when Bart is available to have almost like a charrette scoping discussion, or like see if we can kind of have a little bit of a working session about what it is that we want to get from that. But also I do kind of like the idea of looking at the master plan stuff, and maybe that's kind of on more of a shorter term horizon even. It's starting to talk about what we want the parks and open spaces chapter to talk about. We're not the only ones who are going to provide input on that, but at least know kind of what we think is worth saying.
Right, you know, because our focus, as far as parks go, would be the riverfront parks,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, Shannon,
We can,
John Meyer.
right, and they named, Leo Philium.
Yeah.
They named it, so all of those are there, and I think, and we're, you know, I don't know if Heron Point comes under these kinds of plans, but in some sense, we've talked about it for a footbridge. That's a way, bringing all of those into the plan, mentioning other properties, you know, like the downstream boat landing that, you know, it looks like a public space when you go there.
Yeah. Yeah, and
You know,
especially.
so it kind of ties a lot of stuff together, but those are, I think, and I think sometimes too that the town may have, you know, town personnel may have ideas about where they think Everett should go, because some of them they feel are unlikely to be productive, and I think we want to sort of understand that, and then that'll keep us focused as we talk about it, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of kind of starting to look at some of the master plan stuff before. That's something I haven't really considered personally, and I wouldn't mind just kind of reading a couple other communities and see what they said. You know, see how we might be able to creatively borrow that.
Yeah, the more, I feel quite certain, the more work we put in before the charrette, the more value we can get. It's a pretty big grant, and it's a lot of work to do it anyways. You might as well try to do your pre-work.
And do you envision the charrette would have, here are some ideas or options that we're thinking about, or would it include that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and I think you could have more of a description about what this, you know, you could have sort of some information that we've been kind of finding out, documenting, you know, who has what properties, what right-of-ways are existing, what does the public, you know, what's owned by Newmarket currently and what use is it for, you know, if you have some kind of things, you know, on a bigger map for people when they get there, so they understand what we have, and say right up front if there's something that's too constrained because it's too close to the sewer plant, whatever it is, what's constrained and what isn't constrained.
Yeah.
Then I think people can at least understand a lot more about it, and then, you know, here are some of the ideas we think are promising. We're looking, you know, just doesn't confine language. That's what I figure this will be about, but I think there's a lot more expertise, you know, what do I know? But I think that we should understand that before.
Well, I'm thinking like
Sounds wise
the
to me.
land behind the Public Works building there. And there's a lot of options that we could potentially propose to connect to that, or in what to do with that land.
Right, and if you,
live in
if
shoreline.
you don't want to have a lot of the, if there's parts there that it doesn't make sense to encourage the public to be there, then that would be the perfect place to put a living shoreline, because you want living
Yeah.
shorelines where people
Going down the
don't
front of
walk
it.
all over it.
Yeah.
So you can, and then you can go for grant money for a good living shoreline project, if that makes sense for that. I mean, living shorelines a lot of times are meant to be where marsh can migrate. And that may not, we will have to decide, is that even the right term to use, given the constraints on Shander and stuff. But all of this stuff, we should kind of really figure out, you know, one of the things we could do is say, well, what are the questions we have? If we figure out what our questions are, that we would be wanting to know if we were at a charrette, then we can, then a lot of them we might be able to get more information, more answers to before we even have it. That would really help too.
Again, I'm thinking though, like, do we want to propose options? I mean, there's, like you say, there's the living shoreline, there's a lot you could do with that, and, you know, restrict public access there, or, you know, open up that area where, you know, there's a lot of, I think, different options. And do we want to propose, here is option A, option B, what type of thing? What do you like better? Or what?
Yeah, I think that we have some images and stuff for people that have proposed a pedestrian bridge. That's certainly, I don't think you have to have a lot more information for that, because
Yeah. It's more
before
idea.
you spend money on that, you want to say, this is what, we've talked about this a little bit. We really need feedback before we would put a lot more effort into this idea and see how people react to it, you know, those kind of things, so.
And would some of those projects not be eligible for funding support the way something that was strictly living shoreline, where it wouldn't be?
You know, this is your area, but there's a lot of different grants out there.
There's a lot of money available, and that's, I've always seen or been interested in a living shoreline at Shanda just because it is unique. So like from an ecological standpoint, it might not be the best site that's ever existed. It does score pretty high on DES's like mapper for just generally assessing sites, so like it's not bad by any means. I'm talking, I guess, more about the general area available for that feature is pretty small at Shanda, but it's so unique that I've just always thought that it would draw a lot of funding support because it is kind of a unique feature, and having it right downtown, I've always thought could be maybe not a tourism draw. I mean, it's not,
But an educational,
but something that
Focus.
people would go and see and be like, oh, that's interesting, and oh, I'm right here, maybe I'll go have a drink at, you know, Oak House, or I'll get a coffee or whatever it is, like just something that gets people around the area.
Yeah, well, I think that makes sense, you know, it's not necessarily an either or. It may be, here's a demonstration area that people can be up close to, but expand it in areas.
But what about the other side of the river? I mean, you know, when people see the other side, is it, you know, you could do a lot beautifying that, you know, a lot of wildflowers or whatever, make that a good living shoreline.
It's
project.
definitely possible. I think like the low-lying area over at Heron Point, kind of under the platform, like something like that could potentially work too. I don't know, but there's definitely room or opportunity to do more than just Shanda Park.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see it from Shanda Park, so.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see it right across.
I don't know if there's, you know, along those lines, is there anybody who we, you know, maybe that was part of that original working group, the Living Shoreline Working Group, the experts, is there anybody that we could ask to come to a committee meeting and talk about, you know, sort of, you know, we have this plan, but is there somebody that would be able to speak to, here's the, if you added more in the direction of the sewer plant, public works, is that attractive and feasible for this kind of living shoreline? If you expanded in the direction of Heron Point, is that, you know, what's some idea to make this urban park, start with Shanda, but have a little expansion so it's not so tiny as to not be relevant.
Good thought. I would certainly benefit from hearing some of that.
I think, right,
Yeah, I can send an email or two and see if I can get any bites on that, but it would be interesting to revisit that conversation.
right. Because that was something that when we first had our first meeting with them, the first thing they wanted us to do, because it was a very time-bound project, and the first thing they wanted us to do is, well, what's your scope? And they wanted, clearly from their standpoint, it was important that we narrow it down.
Narrow the scope. Yeah, because they were basically taking it all on for free, so.
Right.
Makes
But at the
sense.
same time, to treat that as if it was some carefully considered decision that this is the scope and no further, and, I think it's helpful to remember how quickly that decision is made and how few people really.
Yeah, no, it's definitely worth seeing if anyone will kind of come and further that discussion, either through DES or anyone else.
UNH,
UNH.
yeah. Especially if it's somebody on the committee, because they're very familiar with it.
Yeah, they would have seen it before. Yeah, I don't mind reaching out, see if we can get anything. That's all I kind of had to bring up. I like the idea of reaching out, seeing if anyone will kind of come and restart that conversation with us. And then, yeah, maybe kind of having a charrette scoping discussion with Bart at some point in the future, maybe a future meeting. And then at least personally, I think I might just start looking at master plan stuff in a couple spots and just getting some ideas out of that. Anything else anyone wants to discuss?
I think that's enough.
Yeah.
Seems like enough to me.
Yeah.
Okay. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Nice. All right. Well,
You're headed out on vacation?
yeah, conclude the meeting.
Next meeting is when?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Well,
good.
let's do that. So we can go back to our second Monday.
The one that's in the calendar, right? Already, in our automatic calendars,
Which would be Monday, September 11th.
I don't remember. I am flying back from Boise, Idaho that day. And I don't know, I can't remember. I haven't done my C&J reservations yet, just exactly when I'll get in. It's an, oh God, awful hour I'm getting on in the morning, but I think I'm sitting in Dallas, Fort Worth for half a day.
Yep. I mean, I'm fine if we want to move it to the 18th. I mean, especially now being down to kind of 4 people for the next month or two. Like,
Yeah.
I think that might be advantageous.
I have no problem with the 18th.
Okay.
All right.
Does that work for you, Joe?
Are we saying the 18th? Right now, no, it's fine.
Yeah, I think that might be good. Just make
Okay.
sure we kind of can keep around.
Do you want me to let Wendy know we're moving the meeting?
Yeah, that would be great. I'll say yes, and then I'll forget for 3 weeks. So, yeah, if you can actually just say it, that would probably be worth doing.
Okay, so Monday, September 18th, right?
Yep.
This time I'll write it down.
Sure.
Scratch that.
Nice.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that will conclude it. Thank you, and have a good evening.
That note that I said there was somebody interested in this, it was actually the Conservation Commission about this. So I didn't send you anything, you didn't miss anything.